Swimming's been a big growth area in the FPL community. Nim, how did you first get into FPL content creating?
Yeah, so I started playing FPL properly in the 12-13 season when a friend at uni was looking for somebody to play with in his mini league. And not many of my friends were football fans at the time. And he knew I was a bit interested in football because I'd been watching Match of the Day with him, mainly for Arsenal, for the updates on Arsenal at the time. But he asked me to play a season with him and I did really well. And from there I was hooked, really. And that got me into thinking when I left uni that I really enjoyed football and I really enjoyed FPL. So I enjoyed kind of communicating with other people who talk FPL. And I joined Twitter and there seemed to be loads of people chatting about FPL, but not many females in the community. So I kind of went onto YouTube, did a bit of searching, couldn't really find anyone else like myself on there. So I thought it'd be a really, really good idea to start a YouTube channel, and it just went really well from there.
Nice. Kylie, what about you? How did you get into it?
Yeah, so my story is quite wildly different to everyone else's because I got into FPL before I got into football. So I'm obviously Australian originally, and I moved to Ireland. I have a lot of family here, but I moved over in 2014, and everyone around me was football mad. And I probably would have been voted amongst all of my friends as the least likely person to ever be interested in football, a game about football, and a podcast about a game about football, So, but because all of my family, my friends, my now fiance, Paul, we're all in a mini league together, and Paul had won that first season I came over. So I thought, right, if I'm going to have to listen to all of this, I'm going to get stuck in. So I spent the whole summer before the 2015-16 season studying. I was Excel spreadsheets and I was like, okay, I don't know the players. I don't know the game. I have a very rudimentary knowledge of actual football, but I'm going to do this thing because I'm very competitive, like an illness. And I did. And I started that season with Mahrez, and I didn't have that bias. So I thought, Mahrez scores 2 goals a game, I'll captain Mahrez. And I finished about 4K overall. And most importantly, I won my mini league by about 100 points.
Nice.
And I beat Paul. So it kind of created a monster. And after that, I found Twitter and I got more actively involved and then ended up podcasting after that. So it's just sort of steamrolled. And now I've got my mum and sister in Australia playing as well. So
it's funny how that happens, isn't it? I mean, that's similar-ish to me. I mean, I was always a massive football fan, so I didn't have that kind of element to it. But it was definitely Lee that dragged me into the FPL community, basically because I always just slated his picks and whenever he was playing without me in the seasons before he started, I was like, why have you got this one or why have you got that one? And he was like, if you think you can do better, come and join me. And I thought, okay, I will then. So started up and that was the 2012-13 season, and since then it's kind of just snowballed into a competitive love affair that we have with FPL in our household, and obviously then into what became the FPL family. Holly, is your story similar or are you kind of coming from a totally different tack? Because I know your husband is not a football fan at all, really, is he?
No, he absolutely hates football. So we were like the wrong dynamic in our house, but it's a good balance. So I think I started playing fantasy football again off the back of the 2014 World Cup. And it was a similar story to a lot of people with a work mini league. I did very well in the World Cup. And then, one of the guys that organised it said, oh, have a go at FPL. And that was it. I was a teacher at the time. It was the summer holidays. I was like, well, I've not got anything better to do. I'm going to get planning, FPL tips, put it in Google, see what comes up, find that there's, a like-minded community on Twitter. And I just got involved and I've just never looked back from then.
Nice. And where did the idea for the FF community come from? Because it's kind of at the centre point, really, I think, for all of us of finding FPL content.
Yeah, exactly. And I sort of recognised the problem where when you've got a deadline on a Friday evening or Saturday morning, there's so much content out there. And, if you're busy in the day, you've not really got the time to absorb it. And I wanted to just bring together all of the content all in one place by creating an aggregate site. And, you know, it's worked really well because it's helped me to integrate into the community on Twitter in particular, where a lot of the content is most shared. And, you know, it's also helped other people to build their profiles as well. So it's a win-win for everyone. So everyone's always been really accommodating of it. And, you know, it's been a really good support network as well.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly find that FF Community is a bit of a go-to, really, because you can see all of the great stuff that's out there, and there's so many great content creators now in the FPL community. It's nice to have everybody in that one place. So I think for most of us, not just women in the community, but everybody, kind of FPL does become a passion. And I kind of wondered where your passions came from. I know for me, the competitive element and the kind of family connection to it is really important. It's the love of Spurs, obviously, kind of is where it all comes from, I suppose. The fact that, you know, I grew up amongst a footballing family where, you know, people, one of my great grandfathers used to play for Southampton. My family are either diehard Spurs or diehard Chelsea, and there's no kind of middle ground. It's not like you're just in it a little bit, you're fully involved in football. And I obviously then married Lee, who was equally just as passionate, but about the red side of Merseyside. And then FPL, I think, just spiraled from that. It was that love of football originally that kick-started it. And then once you get into the community and you start talking about and listening to the FPL side of football, suddenly it's like there's another dimension to the game, and you're interested in games that you would never normally pay any attention to. You know, those littler games that, you know, Spurs aren't playing in, and I'd be like, oh, I'm not so interested in watching whoever it is on a Sunday afternoon. Suddenly they're in my FPL team and I'm like, I've got to be home for 4 o'clock because, you know, whoever is playing. What about you guys? Where does your passion for FPL and for content creating come from?
Well, I think for me, I've always had quite an addictive personality, and it started from those work mini leagues, and it's just grown from there. But I've always loved football, and, you know, I've also loved maths as well and data. So being able to combine the two and be able to delve into the statistics, watch a load of Premier League games that I probably wouldn't be too interested in otherwise, and bringing all that together has just been fantastic. And it started off just being those work mini leagues, but then you get within the community, and then, you know, everyone's talking about overall ranks and, you know, their history and their record. And it's just a unique format, really, because it's a game that's free to play. There's no, you know, monetary incentive for winning, but it's just that prestige that comes with the game that you get with that global audience. And, you know, it's strange because it sort of defies logic, but you just can't help but get involved and push yourself and try and do better each season. And, you know, even that target of being top 10,000 in the world, say, which is, you know, the target that a lot of managers in the community set themselves. You talk to an outsider about fantasy football and they're thinking, 10,000, well, that doesn't sound very good. Shouldn't you be winning it or something like that? And it's like, well, you know, having that target and pushing for that is just really exciting.
Yeah, I think the other element for me is just how all-inclusive FPL is. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're old or young, you're male or female, whatever walk of life you've come from. FPL, you know, like Holly said, is free. And if you have any interest in football, it allows you to really get sucked into enjoying all different teams, doesn't it, really? And I think that's why I'm so passionate about it, is that I get to meet so many people off of the back of it, no matter who you are, you know, and that's just been brilliant for me. I really enjoy that side of it.
Yeah, I would pretty much agree with all of the points that you ladies have raised, because I think all of that comes together. You know, we've often started with mini leagues and there is that competitive piece, because whether it's family, your partner, or friends, it's that competitive piece that drives you initially, and wanting to win your mini league. And so it sort of starts at home a little bit. But then I think for all of us who have found our way to Twitter and different FPL communities, it just opens that world up in this amazing way that you kind of feel connected to everyone, about this one unique game that, yes, and we are all a bit nerdy with it, of course. Like, people who aren't into FPL really do raise an eyebrow sometimes at what we're doing, but it does become all encompassing. It like gives this structure to your week that is mad. You know, you've got all of these other priorities, but it's like at the forefront of your mind is, I have a 4 p.m. deadline. So, you know, if anybody attempts to speak to me 5 minutes beforehand, it's, you know, it's bad. It's going to get really
back
grim.
up.
Yeah, this is
our time.
Yeah. So I think it just builds from there. You know, we get into the community, we realize there's so many people with this same passion for this game that maybe is difficult to define, but it's an incredible thing to be a part of.
We're all massively passionate about FPL. We all love it. That's why it's become such an ingrained part of our lives. But how do we show the wider FPL community about our love of the game and why we love it so much? Holly, your community that you've set up, how does that kind of help the community, I guess, to kind of find the information that they need? Like, why is it that you've become this kind of central pinnacle that we all look to for finding those pieces of content, I guess, that the rest of us put out there?
Well, you'll find on a weekly basis, there'll be some sort of hot topics for the week. There'll be certain players that are injured that we're then trying to transfer in and out. We've got, you know, big captaincy decisions. Some weeks are very split and some weeks are wide open. And you see a lot of content coming together across the platforms on Twitter, website articles, YouTube videos, podcasts that all discuss those topics. And it's about bringing together those wider arguments, because we won't all agree. There will be a lot of, you know, talk about, you know, a herd mentality within the community, but there's always differing opinions, and being able to, you know, select that, you know, best piece of the argument for and against just really helps others to then narrow down how they're going to, you know, approach those decisions week on week.
Kylie, I guess you're similar to me in that you are doing your content creating alongside a couple of chaps at the Three Amigos with Mars and Dom. How do you kind of make sure that you're showcasing, because it's sometimes difficult, isn't it, when there's lots of voices in a podcast, to make sure that you kind of get your view across without just it turning into an argument?
Yeah, I mean, the dynamic is a funny one on Amigos because we are so different, but I think that's what works. And it's sort of the guys had been doing the pod for a couple of episodes, maybe 6 episodes, before I guest featured, and this was really early on in my sort of Twitter days, and then we just clicked really instantly. So there was this funny sort of chemistry that we had where we bounced off each other really well. And I mean, one of the driving forces behind Amigos is presenting all the information, but really it's laced with a lot of humor and inside jokes and a sort of more lighthearted spin, because there's a lot of pod content out there and some of it's really data heavy. So there's something that accommodates everyone. Ours is a little bit lighter. You know, we do cover the stats, but we give a lot of opinion, and sometimes we do disagree, but you kind of want that in a pod. You know, if we all have the same opinion, it's a little bit flat, right? But it's great fun every week. So there's always a few good laughs.
And then you kind of have a bit of both worlds, really, don't you? In your FPL Nymfria YouTube, but then also with the Wildcats over on your other channel. It's kind of 2 differing worlds, I suppose, of FPL content creating. Do you find that your the way that you present your passion is slightly different depending upon whether you're doing it just on your own or with the guys on the Wildcats?
No, not really. I think it's just a case of when I'm on my own channel, I think it's being my bubbly self, and I get to kind of talk more in depth about how my team is doing and my choices and things like that. When I'm with the lads, it's kind of a bit like Kylie and yourself, I guess, with Lee. It's about just enjoying FPL a bit more. And whilst I'm still discussing some of those things, we aren't going into all the heavy stats and all of that sort of stuff. We're just having a good friendly chinwag about FPL.
And I think that's right, isn't it? There are so many different podcasts, YouTube channels out there, and run by both men and women in the community. And being able to have that differing vibe on the different channels is what makes the FPL community, I guess, so great, because whatever kind of you need to help you in your FPL decisions is out there and available.
Definitely.